All right, I think we will get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to this second webinar um, for Soul Conversations. This is a collaboration between the Aurora Soul Security think tank as well as the Safe Soil Movement, which is part of the Isha Outreach. And today we have some really incredible speakers that will be diving into two dimensions, or we'll be talking about their own work, and we'll be talking on two dimensions of the Social Security framework, which is on capital and connectivity. And without further ado, the how it would go today is that we will have a 5 minute recap on the first webinar that we had, which was on capacity and condition. Then we'll have the first presenter, which is myself in this case, and talking about connectivity and capital, so that we can set the stage for all the speakers. We will then have the second speaker, Avanti, talk about global awareness campaign that the Safe Soul movement has been doing. And then Haniet will be talking about Indigenous people's stories. Didi will be talking about the capital local case studies. And finally, we will have a panel discussion. And I will introduce you guys a lot better uh, uh, when the time comes. But let me go ahead with a summary of what happened on the first. So I'll go ahead and share screen. And for those of you that were not present in the first webinar, we had some really, really good speakers as well. Dr. Warting, Dr. Christina Magahu, Dr. Virastuti Wijamanti, and Dr. Sandra Evangelista were telling us a little bit about their work. We first started with Wartining, who was presenting the entire framework itself. And the framework is a set of dimensions: capacity, condition, capital, connectivity, codification across 23 roles that are divided between functions, services, and threats. If you think this is a little bit fast, don't worry. In the very first presentation, we will take a little bit more time in order to discuss it. But I did want to perhaps borrow from one of our speakers today, from Didi Pershouse, who she herself has some pretty nice ways to explain the capacity and condition. So, for example, different soils have different capacities, and one of the most important things that soils do is be able to store and regulate water. And soil is this emergent property. It's this incredible emergent property of the earth that if it was just like flour and you pour water on it, it doesn't really get absorbed and it'll just move away. And I'm sure that I'm not doing quite justice to that, but she will be able to correct me with anything. But once the soil gets cooking and we have a soil that is well developed and it has good structure and is healthy with a lot of microbial activity, then it's like more like the bread. And if you were to pour water over this bread, the water is not going to make it all the way through. It's going to be nicely absorbed, and that's why she has this um, whole concept of the soil sponge that is very nice. And that would be talking about capacity. Some soils do better at this than others. On condition, you can have the same soil have different levels of condition, and some of them might be very unhealthy because they don't no longer have that structure, and therefore they no longer sustain those particles well, and therefore you could have the degradation of soil and the movement of preferentially silt-sized particles into lower in the watershed. Whereas if we retain that structure and we have a protection of that soil, then we get a lot less of that damage and a lot less water because it acts like a sponge and it does regulate the timing of it moving down. So we'll let her talk a little bit more about that later on. But Wartini then talked also about capacity and how we have done some work in order to be able to differentiate between condition and capacity by looking at what we call pedogenomes, which are clusters of soil properties that were based upon the CLORPT model, which is the development of soil. So over at the University of Sydney, they've been doing some really incredible work to try to do that, not only in Australia but across the world. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then she also explained about genosoils and phenosoils, which is a demarcation that separates this clustering into whether they have been highly um, modified by human actors or not. And she went on through perhaps a little bit more of the steps behind the soil security assessment. Um, Afterwards, we had Dr. Christine Mahadru from eCraft talk a little bit about the soil data for farmer-driven restoration, and she reminded us about the importance of having a very secure soil, as well as some of the perils that we're facing. Just in Africa, 65% of the agricultural land there is already degraded. But she also gave us a lot of hope with her work that included uh, a lot of gathering of information of the soil data across sub-Saharan Africa, as well as connecting to all the different stakeholders in a very meaningful manner. We then had Dr. Wijayanti tell us about using this framework in Indonesia in order to understand how it impacted an area in the Java island for rice production. And she went through a lot of depth, but ultimately was able to create this map that very easily communicated to government officials areas where it was insecure, marginally secure, moderately to highly secure, and highly secure, and as well as correlate that security score to a productivity. And last but not least, Dr. Evangelista gave us a case study in the wine region of Hunter Valley in Australia, in New South Wales, where she was able to also use this idea of petagenon and phenogenon in order um, to look at differences in the nutrient cycling condition and say whether it's been improved or degraded. This is not at all a fair representation of all the incredible things that they said. So I do recommend you guys to go and check out the video, and you have both the link and a little QR code down there for you guys to take a look at that video. But today we have an incredible panel. I'm very, very excited. Um, so I myself will be talking in the very first one. That's not part of the such incredible panel, I think. The most incredibles are Avanti Pete, who works with the Conscious Planet vision, and they have a vision for raising human consciousness and transforming solution to the pressing challenges that humanity faces today, from mental health to ecological sustainability. She represents Save Soil at global platforms, including the UN, COP events, with one of them coming up. She's also led communication to in various Safe Soil milestones, one of them being a 100-day Safe Soil journey across 30,000 kilometers and 27 nations in order to raise awareness about soil degradation globally. We then have Dr. Hania Mohani, who joins us from the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. She is an Indigenous advocate and an international legal scholar who works to ensure that Indigenous knowledge systems are not only recognized, but also connected to global governance. And her work reminds us that soil is cultural and capital, and legal capital is inseparable from the ecological value that there is. And then last but definitely not least, we have Didi Pershaus, who is known worldwide for her deeply participatory workshops with the Land and Leadership Initiative on her role of a healthy soil sponge and preventing flooding, drought, heat waves, and fire. She is the author of The Ecology of Care, which she gave me permission not to say the whole subtitle, but I think that it gives us so much information. So the subtitle for that book is Medicine, Agriculture, Money, and the Quiet Power of Human and Microbial Communities. She's also the author of Understanding Soil Health and Watershed Function that is used in over 100 countries. While serving in the Vermont State appointed Payment for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group, she helped to reorient the state away from the financing of financialization of nature and back toward the publicly funded initiatives. She has worked closely with the UN FAO Farmer Field School Program and the Andhra Pradesh Natural Farming Initiative, involving over 1 million farmers in India. You can find her at the Wisdom Underground on Substack, where she has blogs. And with that said, um, I will stop the share for just 1 second so I can switch really quickly on the presentations, and we will get started. So again, the very first presentation is kind of setting up the entire webinar today. And it's called Those Who Know Care and Those Who Care Lobby. And this will be talking a lot about what is soil connectivity and what is soil capital. Over here, I am more familiar with the connectivity side, and therefore I'll be presenting work that we did at the University of Sydney, but in collaboration also with Agri Know-How and the Australian Farm Institute. And here we have the people that have been involved in all of this work and more. Why have this framework at all? And the main idea is that language shapes the way that we think and determines what we can think about. Therefore, soil, we can recognize it as the nexus and the center of so much and so many of the different challenges that are facing humanity. But just like the Inuit and other tribes may have many different words for snow, it's good to have, and that serves them to coordinate in order to better and communicate with one another when you have different conditions of snow out there, whether you're traveling from one place to another, whether you're trying to build something together, whether you're trying to get somewhere. So similar to that, this framework gives us the language to coordinate better around protecting our soils and securing them. So in this case, what we have is the idea of not only the biogeochemical classic type of communication that we have around soils, but to bring in and acknowledge the more social aspects of it. That includes the valuation of soil, like what is the value of soil, but also what is the bond that people have with their soil and what policies exist for that soil. And we do that across 23 different roles that you can briefly see here. But again, this just gives us 40 different ways to think about soil. And I can more easily say, hey, let's talk today about soil as a filter and remediator of contaminants, and how well are how many laws exist for it? What are the laws effective? How are we doing on that sense? So it's just an easier way to coordinate around it. It also gives us 35 different ways to think about soil services. And it gives us another 40 different ways to think about soil threats, for a total of 115 ways to think about soil. And let me hide this. Because of this, it allows us, and it allows other researchers around the world to come up with ways to measure and talk about those different aspects of soil. For example, building mobile applications in order to improve connectivity, or how we can search for effective tools and language to promote awareness, as well as mapping citizens' attitudes towards ecosystem services. I would very, very briefly mention the work that was done here at the University of Sydney, along with some other collaborators. And part of the question is, what is connectivity? And again, the idea is that we're trying to measure the bond that people have to a very specific soil. So this is not about soil as an abstract, but it's about soil that that you have in your backyard. How much do you know about that soil in your backyard, or the soil that you plow, or the soil that you get your water from? Even if you're in the city, you depend on many different types of soils, and how much do you know about them is what we were trying to get at. And we were working with social scientists to come up with, okay, if we had to measure, what do we want to measure? And we came down to the idea of, because if you can measure, you can manage it. What is the level of knowledge that people may have? What is the level of action that people take based on that knowledge? And what is the attitude that they have? And how does it influence their actions? And how is knowledge influencing those attitudes? Now, again, we're not going after all soils because soils can be quite different. Instead, we were asking them to think of a particular soil, and we began by asking them to describe it as well as to give us a little bit of reference. And this is just an example. And they could give us the coordinates if they wanted to, which would allow us to merge that to all the other incredible information that we've been gathering. I know that my time's probably running out, but let me just quickly say that it works, and it allows us to spatially get information that we can then say, hey, knowledge is very well, because there was a lot of work done to try to improve knowledge about salinization, and there was a lot of worry in the 2000s. But the attitudes vary across, and therefore the actions vary across, meaning that it's the level of connectivity that people have across Australia is different. Now, the vision for the future in this case is that we will get each one of the areas where people have similar soils and be able to connect them into communities that can share that information, actions, and attitudes in order to improve the way that we secure soils. Similarly, we can do something like that with capital. And capital, we can say, well, what is the society's willingness to pay for soil security? Should we be doing it at all? Is it an emerging imperative? What are some of the, how do people make these choices as they go along? And for example, what is the value of something like water available capacity? So this allows us to do that kind of work once we start thinking about it as a dimension. And I wanted to bring this one up because I think that it encapsulates why this dimension exists. Does it make sense to assign soil an intrinsic economic value calculated by volume or weight and based on its most important characteristics for the primary purpose of safeguarding it? And they say, yes, it does. And they went on to say that the goal of this evaluation is to ensure that the price reflects the true cost of extraction, use, and depletion, mainly so that perhaps by giving soil a tangible value, and it could raise the public awareness and improve the management and strengthen its conservation. But I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the work that we've been doing here. So this is work that was led by Nicholas Frankos, and he was able to put a money value to that water capacity on the top 100 centimeters across Australia, and come up with this value of, if we increase the available water capacity by just 1 millimeter, it increases the value about almost 300 Australian dollars for the farmland price in Australia. So that is the kind of things that we can do once we start thinking about soils using this framework. So sorry that may have taken a little bit longer than the 7 minutes, but I think that hopefully it sets the stage for why we have this framework, and also to set up these wonderful conversations that we're having today. So thank you, and let me go ahead and present again Avanti Pete with a Conscious Planet, and let her talk about the incredible work that they've been doing there. So Avanti, take it away.
Thanks so much, Julio, and thank you so much for showing us about the incredible work you all have been doing with bringing soil at the nexus as a solution. Wonderful to be with all of you here today, and a privilege to be among such accomplished individuals as panelists. It's a pleasure for us to share what we've been doing at the Safe Soil Movement. So I'll just share my screen now. Please let me know if this is coming through all right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. So just to set a bit of background on our work and who we are. We have been working as Isha Outreach in India with farmers on the ground for over 25 years. And with a lot of trial and error, learning on the ground with the farmers, we've worked on models that now work, which are scalable, replicable, and we're able to transition and handhold farmers at a large scale to tree-based ag as well as regenerative agricultural practices. Secondly, we worked on a national policy campaign in 2017 to save India's dying rivers. And that campaign was successful enough where we were able to bring this as a policy recommendation across all the 29 states and move forward. So, this sets a bit of context of our work on the ground as well as at the policy level, sharing a small snapshot of the success of both of these projects. So the work with farmers, we continue to work with them. Almost quarter million of them now transition to tree-based as well as regen ag practices. 124 million trees planted to date, and we continue to go strong on the ground there in South India. Secondly, with our national policy campaign, it was a 30-day awareness campaign where 162 million citizens showed their support for a positive policy change for our rivers. Now, this was done through simple, effective, and positive messaging, and it has led to the government announcing a project where they've actually backed it with some funds to rejuvenate 13 of India's major rivers. Now, this, apart from setting a good precedence for us to scale, the concerns that we noticed in India on the ground, whether it is with the rivers, farmers, or soil, is not just unique to India, but the situation globally is concerning. Looking at stats, which I think many of us here on the call might be familiar with, I don't want to delve into it, but with where the degradation stands today and the ramifications that um, unhealthy or ramifications that soil degradation has on human health is so enormous that it called for us to take and scale this campaign to a global level. Now, given that soil has no legal status like air or water, given that it can actually address the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, and the interconnectedness and the depth of relationship between human health and soil health isn't spoken of enough, and the strength of democracies needs to be harnessed much more. So, with all of this, all of these factors playing up, we launched the global Save Soil campaign by our founder Sadhguru. Now, the intent was to use and garner people's support to raise their awareness and create a relationship about what soil really means to human health. Once that awareness is raised and people voice their concern for soil, this will be heard by politicians and then into policy. Now, this campaign was done by a 100-day launch journey. So it was a 100-day motorcycle journey from the UK all the way to South India across 27 countries. Now, we did multiple events across that entire journey. We were on the road for almost 3 months. And just some of the key stats of how many people we reached, the number of events we did, and the media articles we got. So, this journey was done where we reached out to the public. We had politicians, influencers, people from all walks of life coming together and understanding and learning about soil. At the same time, making people connect with this in such a deep way where they became the voice for soil. So just sharing our overall communication channels to amplify this message. As I said, we did about 39 public events where people attended this in the thousands, along with a live web stream globally. So this was going on for almost 100 days. We then had we made use of traditional media. There's TV, radio, magazine, newspapers, blogs, you name it, and we tried to make sure that soil is spoken about as much as we can in those days. Social media was one of our largest and most impactful channels. Now, given that someone like Sadhguru, who's a globally known figurehead, uh, put his life on the line for 100 days just to raise awareness for soil, drew in a lot of emotional connect with the people, and also made people understand the urgency to address the situation. We engaged on social media through collaborations as well with leading voices for soil. So we engaged with scientists, we used influencers, celebrities, sports people for the audience and for people to individually know that this is something of importance, of value, and urgency. Now, having said that, this trickled down after the 100-day campaign. This inspired a number of individuals and volunteers to continue further. So, the methods of communication post the campaign continue to be with in person events and exhibitions at community levels, local and city councils, schools, various booths, farmers' markets, and this is volunteers or whom we call Earth Buddies across the globe participating. Additionally, we still engage with traditional media. We try to weave in stories with current global situations, whether it is natural calamities like forest fires, wildfires, droughts, floods, to soil degradation, in addition to the uh, cost of food, the cost of not addressing soil degradation and things like that as media pieces. We use social media again as one of our most important tools to spread awareness and also collaborate with partners. And interestingly, the 100-day motorcycle journey has inspired several individuals across the globe from ages 16 to 60 who have taken incredible journeys across countries and many across continents to raise awareness about soil. So, a few people have ridden across 3 or 4 continents, cycled across, pedaled their way through, met with earth buddies, individuals, local councils all across to talk about soil and take it forward. I'm just going to share a little bit of a snapshot of our people's awareness work that continues with community events, media engagements. At the bottom, you can see some of the news articles on those who've cycled for soil in various countries, a few children's books released. This on top is an event in Bulgaria, which was an art exhibition hosted by the mayor to talk more about soil degradation in their country. A lot of such efforts continue. This may be a small part that we play to raise awareness, but at least the ball is rolling. This is all we have to share right now, and looking forward to the next panelist. Thanks, Julio.
Thank you so much for that, Avanti. That was really good. I want to thank everyone from around the world. We have people from Spain. We have Sonia from Spain. We have Lynette from Nigeria, Duncan from Tasmania, and Ranveer from Mauritius. I encourage you guys to let us know where you guys are coming in from, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there on this Sunday. Avanti, just because it seems like we are a little bit over the time, I'm gonna ask people to please put your questions in the chat, and then we'll come back to it at the end, and allow everyone to have we'll let everyone do the presentations, and then we'll come in with questions at the end. Is that okay? Okay, wonderful.
Thanks.
So let's move to our second speaker for today. Again, Dr. Haniyeth Mohani is an expert member of the UN Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. She's an Indigenous advocate, international legal scholar, and policy expert dedicated to advancing the rights of Indigenous peoples and the recognition of their knowledge system. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. Take it away, Hania. And you are muted at the moment.
Hello everyone, thank you very much, Julio. I hope I am audible now, and thanks for giving me this opportunity to share our perspective as Indigenous peoples to you in this very important um, opportunity. Just a very quick introduction from um, my perspective. When I want to introduce myself, I often say I am an indigenous dust in the entire galaxy. I hold two doctoral degrees from academic institutions, but I believe my most important degree is the one I am trying to earn from the greatest university in existence, nature itself. And the indigenous elders, the bearded men, and the silver-haired women who live in direct relationship with it. And I must confess, I am still a student there, and I am far from graduating. I come from the Shahsaran Tribal Confederacy, and which is a nomadic pastoralist community in Iran, where life is in daily contact with every element of nature, and above all, with soil itself. For us, soil is not abstract at all, and it is the ground we walk on, the source of our food, and the keeper of our water, and also the bed where our animals rest, and the memory of our ancestors. We quite literally live on soil and with soil. And for indigenous people, the relationship with soil began not with the textbook, but with culture, with lullabies and stories and proverbs and song. And every indigenous child is first introduced to soil, not through modern science, but through imagination and affection and our all six senses. In our lullabies, soil is a character and a living entity and a teacher and a companion. And so I will take you on a journey with me that begins with the lullabies and stories of my own community and extends through our practices of seasonal migration and then connects to broader frameworks such as the territories of life and soil, health, and the carbon storing power of our rangelands. Through this journey, I hope we can see soil not only as a physical substance, but as a bridge between culture and ecology and the future of humanity. In my childhood, soil was never understood as an inert material. It was alive, a living presence with dignity and even moral authority. In the lullaby sung by my grandmother, soil was not silent. It was teacher, it was courtyard, as the womb of bread, the the cradle of plants, and the resting bed of our ancestors. The songs reminded us that if you treat soil with care, it will nourish you. If you wound it, it will grieve and withdraw its generosity. These lullabies and stories were not only cultural or ornamentation, they were a curriculum of survival and repeated across generations. And the metaphors embedded in them carried practice um, and ecological instructions. Do not overuse, do not erode, and do not poison, and do not forget gratitude. Um, in the Shahsaban migration, our route, soil was the invisible boundary of all decisions. Migration routes were chosen to avoid trampling fragile ground, and the camps were placed in resilient spots. Grazing was rotational to allow soil recovery, and even rain was carefully guided to benefit soil, not erode it. Migration was not just movement, it was ecological governance for us. And indigenous peoples never see soil in isolation. Soil is the foundation of cycles linking water, plants, animals, and people themselves and everything. Change one and you alter all. This systematic vision and holistic view is at the core of indigenous knowledge. The soil is not a resource, but a living relationship. Modern soil science evaluates soil health through a range of biophysical indicators such as levels of soil organic carbon, infiltration capacity, and water retention or nutrient cycling efficiency, and aggregate stability and the diversity of soil microbial communities. These metrics are now central to global frameworks such as the FAO Global Soil Partnership and the Sustainable Development Goals. What is often overlooked, however, is that many indigenous land management systems have long sustained preciously these soil functions. For example, rotational and seasonal grazing systems practiced by nomadic pastoralist groups reduce compaction, allow vegetation recovery, and promote soil aggregate stability. Outcomes that soil scientists now identify as critical to maintaining infiltration and carbon storage. Similarly, the deliberate return of organic matter through livestock manure or plant residues has paralleled with what is now termed regenerative agriculture. The protection of biological soil crusts and in arid and semi-arid areas where I am living, often embedded in indigenous customary rules about where and when our animals may graze, align with scientific finding about their role in preventing erosion and enhancing infiltration and fixing nitrogen. I should skip these and these slides. The integration of indigenous soil knowledge into science and policy is not optional. It is essential, but how we do it matters. A human rights-based approach provides a clear and constructive pathway. It ensures that collaboration is not extractive, but instead generates trust, legitimacy, and innovation. Seen through these lenses, ethics are not constraints but enablers. They are what allow co-production of soil knowledge to move beyond short-term projects towards transformative partnership. And all of these materials can be found on international law and policy instruments such as UN DRIP, such as the two covenant, human rights covenant, and UN guiding principles on business and human rights. When indigenous soil knowledge is marginalized, what happens? Actually, the consequences unfold on multiple levels. The ecological effects are stark, such as soil erosion accelerates when terraces and grazing rest systems are abundant. And the other one, flood and salinization intensify, where indigenous water calendars and qanat system that we have in West and Central Asia are replaced by unsustainable extraction and dust storms, where we are facing all during the years proliferate when biocrusts and native vegetation are disrupted. There are so many other effects when we ignore indigenous knowledge, but I should skip to naming them because of our time. And this is my last slide. What we can do and what should be the pathway forward. The way forward is not to replace indigenous soil knowledge and soil science with scientific modern framework, but to allow them to walk side by side. And this requires co-designing soil health indicators with indigenous peoples so that scientific metrics and customary knowledge reinforce each other. It also calls for pilot projects across 7 sociocultural regions of indigenous peoples and treating each as a living laboratory where local stewardship and knowledge informs global policy. And finally, it means recognizing grassland carbon not merely as a biophysical measurement, but as an ecosystem service actively sustained by indigenous governance through the centuries and of their territories of life. Only through such partnership can we achieve soil conservation and soil governance that is scientifically rigorous and socially just and ecologically enduring. Thank you very much.
Very, very powerful. Thank you. Thank you, Hani, Dr. Mahagni. Again, I do have perhaps a few questions, but I'm gonna leave them towards the end there. And I encourage anyone to write your questions down in the chat so that we can converse about them at the end. Thank you to the people that have joined us and telling us where you're from. So we have Mahnas from Bahrain, and we also have Nkole Mwamba from where are you joining us from? From Zambia. So thank you so much for joining this talk. Yeah, I'll leave this question towards the end so that we can go ahead and if you're okay with that. And Didi Pershaus is the author of The Ecology of Care, as well as The Understanding of Soil Health and Watershed Function, that is used in over 100 countries. She has workshops with the Land and Leadership Initiative on the role of the healthy soil sponge, and she's worked closely with UN FAO Farmer Field School Program and the Andhra Pradesh Natural Farming Initiative, involving over 1 million farmers in India. Again, you can follow her Substack, The Wisdom Underground. But she's also part of the Vermont state-appointed Payment for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group. So tell us a little bit about that and perhaps go into that capital component of the dimension. Take it away,
Yes.
Didi.
Thank you. This has been so wonderful. I'm really glad to be with all of you here, and it's wonderful to see people arriving from so many places. Let's see, here we go. Okay. So, well, I'll say that when I was invited to speak to this topic, it really caught my attention because it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, even though it's not the primary focus of a lot of my work. But I have been affected by this concept of soil as capital, and it started when I was the board director of the Soil Carbon Coalition, and we were measuring soil carbon throughout North America, as well as water infiltration and bulk density and other measures. And at conferences, we were often approached by people who wanted to measure soil carbon as a financial instrument, as a way of creating profit while bringing money to farmers. And that was not the reason that we were measuring it. The real story starts in 2018, 2019. There was a group of farmer watershed groups that approached the state of Vermont, which is in the Northeast USA, and said, we would like the state or the region to hire us as watershed contractors, the way that you would hire a carpenter to fix your roof, that knowledgeable farmers to teach other farmers and to work with the land in such a way that they could heal the catchment, heal the water cycle, and heal the broken topsoil in the region. The state said, okay, we will set up a pilot program. And they set up this group, this working group that met. I was on the group and we met from 2019 to 2023. And if you think about those dates, it's a very particular period. Within just a couple of months of our group forming, the COVID shutdown started. And so this was all happening in a lot of chaos. And our goal was to set up a pilot program so that these farmer watershed groups could do what they were proposing. However, the makeup of the working group and the agenda of the working group was very odd, and those of us who knew the origins could not understand why it kept going in this direction. That instead of talking about soil health or soil function, they were using language like natural capital, natural assets, ecosystem payment for ecosystem services, etc. And over time, we realized that there were other things happening that affected what we were, how we were able to talk about it. So in September of 2020, water futures became a tradable commodity on Wall Street, like gold or oil, where investors can bet on the likelihood of future scarcities of water. So if you remember, some of you may have seen a movie called The Big Short, where that led to the global economic collapse in 2008, where people were betting that the real estate market would fail, and they made a huge amount of money from that. And actually, the person who made the most money from that failure of the global economic collapse said that the next thing he was going to bet on was water scarcity, and that he was going to do that by investing in land in places where there was water and selling the food that was grown in those soils to places that have no water. The Investopedia website, this to me is the most chilling and upsetting quote I think that I have seen in decades. This is a website for investors. We know water is the source of life, but it can also be a source for portfolio diversification or making money. Like gold and oil, water is a commodity, and it happens to be rather scarce nowadays. Investors can gain exposure to the commodity through brokers who offer water indexes, mutual funds, and exchange-traded funds. So, as with any other scarcity, the water shortage creates investment opportunities. Now, everyone here knows that water is only available because of soil structure and soil function. So while we were still meeting in 2021, Wall Street Security and Exchange Commission announced it was creating a new asset class called natural asset companies. It was valued at trillions of dollars and many times the entire global economy. And it would give them shareholders who were buying into this natural asset companies the right to trading natural capital and ecosystem services. So this goes back to this idea of ecosystem services. If we look at what the original estimate back from 2007, now put forward to this was 2022, estimated to be worth over $4 quadrillion. This is hard to even imagine what this is. And it was promoted by the group that started this idea of natural asset companies as representing a virtually unlimited set of metaphorical gold mines for the taking by natural asset corporations. So this is from an article by John Bellamy Foster called The Defense of Nature, Rejecting the Financialization of Earth. Many of us, I'm assuming, are familiar with the carbon trading markets. And the issues there that we've seen over the many years that these have been being developed, more recently for soil carbon, but for a long time with forest carbon, is that very often there are shareholders, owners, or brokers who are making a lot of profit with very little money or real benefit going to ecosystem residents, so human or non-human residents or the land stewards. Another issue is that soil carbon as net carbon, the management practices, the metrics, and the models of how much carbon is accumulating can be created by the trading companies themselves. So I say, oh, if you do this practice, you're gaining this much carbon. Now I'm going to sell that to an airline that is polluting. But what we know is that soil carbon is very difficult to measure. That's one of the things we learned in the Soil Carbon Coalition. It's not that it's difficult to do the work of measuring, it's that it's very irregular. It varies at depth, it varies from meter to meter. And so it's very hard to do it without a model where you're making tremendous assumptions. And also in many cases, there are false promises being made to farmers and tribal groups and governments. Some examples of these for carbon credits, evicting hunter-gatherers from their ancestral lands to profit from carbon offsetting schemes. In Peru, they came and tore down this person's home and kicked them out. This is in Africa, if you're interested to read more about this, the Red Monitor on Substack is an excellent resource for this. This is the UN Economic Commission for Africa was saying that Africa could earn $82 billion a year from carbon offsets. And that was based on the idea that the carbon offsets were up here, but at the time that was being stated, carbon offsets were like 1/100th of the price. So lots of things, 94% of forest-based carbon offsets were phantom credits and false. They don't actually counteract emissions, etc. And then just yet another example of that one country is leasing land from another or buying up credits in advance, which basically gives them control over the land and the management in order to get these credits that many times are false and that are not actually leading to reduction of CO2 because they are still allowing somebody else to pollute somewhere else. So, Julio, I really appreciate you talking about language at the beginning, and I know that my presentation is a bit of a challenge, and I deeply appreciate that you are invited me anyway. And I would say that some of this language, like natural capital and ecosystem services, it slips by us because it reflects this kind of neoliberal worldview where we financialize all of our relationships. So it seems natural to many of us to talk about investing in a relationship with our own children or to think of our friends and colleagues as social capital. And interestingly, the term natural capital, I believe, was first used by Karl Marx, but he saw this, that the capitalist focus on exchange value and profit led to a metabolic rift with nature, or a basic argument with nature, that it disrupted the sustainable cycles for life, and that capitalism alienates humans from nature by treating it as just simply a source of raw materials and waste, prioritizing profitable results over long-term ecological health. So natural capital or natural assets is this language suggests that soil, water, biological systems exist as capital or an asset to be owned or traded rather than as living systems with their own rights. So reminiscent of the mindset that sells and enslaves humans to this day. Is soil as capital a true economy? So the word economics actually carried a sense of care and nestedness. Oikos means home, nomi means care, so it meant the care of home. Or Aristotle defined it as the science of living virtuously as a member of the community through wise household management. I don't think that capital reflects that kind of relationship. This term ecosystem services was coined as part of the argument that the only way to protect nature is by financializing it. But some of us have said that perhaps what's really going on is that the only way to financialize nature is to protect it or assign it value. And if you read the kind of source materials, you start to see that coming out when people are talking about this. I do believe that all people are doing the best they can and are good, and that it's policies and programs that are flawed, not the people themselves. So I do believe that many of the originators of this did want to protect nature, but it has been picked up as I think often unconsciously. Defined as services that an ecosystem provides to humans and to businesses. It ignores the fact that ecosystem processes, which I prefer as a term, these ecosystem processes benefit and affect all of life. And it's a bit like the idea that a woman's role is to service a man's sexual needs rather than seeing women as full participants in the circle of life. And really key here, which has come out in the rights of nature movement, that this natural workforce has no rights and receives no payments. The payment is from owner to owner, while nature is the unpaid servant. I won't read this article. This is a quote from an article that I've written on this that I can point you to later. But just say, what are some effective ways? So how do we deal with the economics of soil regeneration? So one, which you're hearing me about now, is to reject the financialization of nature. The Indigenous Environmental Network has many, many, many good resources on this. And our final report to the legislature for that working group gave a lot of this other ways of addressing this. We ended up redirecting public funds to farmers rather than private funds to farmers. Drafting and passing rights of nature laws in the Constitution or in local laws is a very powerful thing. It's been done in quite a few countries. Study places where soils are being regenerated without payments or incentives. So the Andhra Pradesh Community Managed Natural Farming Initiative has over 1 million farmers who have been shifting to all natural farming, to incredible soil regeneration, incredible productivity, much better net profitability with no incentives, no payments directly to the farmers, because the farmers themselves are making more money by farming in ways that treat the soil with respect. A couple of others examples we could talk about later, but mentoring from farmer to farmer. Another key thing is really using power mapping and engagement of stakeholders early on to protect those who are stewarding the soil and to protect the land tenure of those who are doing that work. So Precious Piri in Zimbabwe has done a lot of work with this, because she found that without that, they would regenerate the soil of the grasslands, and then the government would come in and say, hey, that's great, we're going to turn it into a safari park, now all of you need to leave. So learn about the laws that protect wealth. There's a great book called Coding Capital by Katerina Pistor. that we were talking about yesterday, and she has a new book out. And there are a group of us that are really encouraging wealthy people and corporations to divest rather than invest, to donate money, not just for tax breaks, but to really get rid of any excessive wealth rather than investing in order to get returns, because that's where the problems generally happen. How to give away money without disrupting the relationships in a community is a whole other topic, but just a warning that, large sums of money coming into a community can be as disruptive as poverty in many cases in terms of the fighting that can break out around that. The last one is really to learn about money itself and where it comes from, and to grow local sources of money. So it is true that money can be created in order to get things done. New York State created actual money to protect the catchment or watershed where all of the water came from. People have created state banks and credit unions that can provide money for real projects. And in Andhra Pradesh, India, or actually in all of India, there are these women's self-help economic groups where poor rural women would save part of their money to lend to each other for projects. And those are the groups that have driven these 1 million farmers into these agroecological practices that are doing such tremendous work there. So I know it's very late in this, in terms of how developed this framework is, and I love the framework. I love the crosshatch way of doing things. But I would still say, instead of capital, consider some other C's: cooperation, collaboration, consideration, collectivism, community, and maybe the group can think more, because I know these are not but I think that thinking about what are other ways that we talk about exchange, and these are some of the words that I came up with. Okay, that's the end.
All right. Thank you, Didi, for that provocative talk. And thank you, everyone, again, for joining us on this second webinar. Let me remind you that the next webinar is not at, it will be 1 hour before right now. Wherever you are in the world, it's going to be 1 hour before, and we will have we will have Alex McBratney, we will have Dr. Irene Hauser, and as well as Dr. Praveen. Oh, sorry, I had that information handy. Well, let me just make sure I get it right. Yeah, we will have Dr. Pravina Sridhar and also Anand Ethri Rahalu talking with us. So please join us for that next weekend as well, for the last soil conversation about soil security, which will be focusing on codification, or on the laws aspect of this. I am not seeing any questions per se. I do have quite a few myself, and if you don't mind, I'd like to start with a question for Dr. Mohani. Dr. Mohani, even as we can use this framework to better understand knowledge, actions, and attitudes, and like you said, we can use this information perhaps to unite communities across by shared information, especially in areas where perhaps some of these indigenous knowledge has been lost. How do you see, how can we share that information, knowing that a lot of it is very local, but for example, the prairies that you were mentioning, you can have some similar soils and similar ecosystems in other parts of the world. What would be a good way to share all of that knowledge, and how to act, and the attitudes that are done in a responsible manner that also acknowledges that some of it is a local story that doesn't translate very easily to somewhere else in the world?
Thank you, Julia, for this question. They told me that in my presentation it was very far from my mouth. I'm trying to keep it very close. Um, what you are asking, we have so many principles in international law and international human laws about how these knowledge should be achieved and should be used, specifically when it comes to indigenous people's knowledge. To be very frank, actually, according to the um, scientific outcome, 80% of the existing biodiversity are located in the territories of indigenous peoples and local communities. But what we are facing in the realities is that whenever our scientists are extracting those knowledge from the territories that were conserved and and the main stewardship were indigenous peoples and local communities, they do not even ask them and ask for their permission to enter and to grab their knowledge. The main principle that we have both in the CBD and Nagoya Protocol and also in UN DRIP that it was adopted consensusly by all the states of the United Nations, which its name is United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. It has a very specific principle and we call it free, prior, and informed consent. Maybe it may seem very simple, but for practicing this very important principle, you should be aware that many important rules of law are indicated in this very important principle. And this is how the collaboration between scientists and indigenous peoples, local communities can be happen. And from to collaboration and and to have this side by side collaboration between modern scientists and indigenous scientists, it should be consideration of these principles of and rule of law and principles of international human and international law. So there are so many other principles like ABS, access and benefit sharing, again um, mentioned in both KMGBF and before that in CBD, I mean Convention on Biodiversity Conservation, and KMGBF is Kunming-Munro Global Biodiversity Framework that has 23 targets. ABS or access and benefit sharing should be in a good phase, also distributed to indigenous peoples and local communities whenever we are getting their knowledge. And to be again very frank, the modern knowledge is not reached to us in a vacuum. It has some important background and who kept these knowledge for us were indigenous peoples and local communities. And that's why we are trying to always say it should be recognized that this knowledge is also science, but not in a um, modern pattern, but it is science and it is knowledge and it should be kept by modern scientists. I hope I could answer to your question.
Yeah, no, and as you were speaking, it reminded me that there is a lot of ethnopathological work that tries to understand the different worldviews, and particularly to mind comes to a paper from Mexico in which um, uh, they try to capture the knowledge that people have on soils, and they try to use the soil security framework in order to be systematic in the way that they try to understand, well, what is it that we understand about the soils in these different manners, and then try to get that into a format. And in this case, it was a local scientist that was doing that in Mexico. So perhaps it diverts some of these issues that we have on helicopter science and possibly by being a local scientist is able to deal with that a little bit better. But definitely some very interesting issues in order to grasp that information and acknowledge it in acknowledge its provenance and also use it in a scientific manner in meaning in a way that allows us to understand the world and make responsible actions and management of it around the world. I'm all not seeing a question on the chat, but please, again, if you guys have any questions, do let me know. I do know that we're running towards the end. If you guys want to stay a little bit longer, we will definitely stay just a few minutes, although I know that our speakers, you may have other things. So if at any point you can no longer stay, please let me know. But with that said, Didi, your conversation was very interesting, and very much focused on a particular point that is when you have global investors and you have global type of work. So a lot of our work has been used already in order to promote actions such as cover cropping, or as to tell people and farmers in a way that is like, hey, yes, sometimes adopting this has a penalty of a few years while it takes hold, but after a certain amount of years, then it's when you start having better and the costs of doing cover crops and the cost of maybe switching starts paying off, and that is and we use capital in order to do that. Do you see that as something that works in that aspect?
I think there's definitely a place for paying for farmers during a transition time. And I think that also paying farmers for education, for mentoring, for the costs of making a transition, in part because farmers are so much of their own capital, their own finance is often bound up in loans that carry incredible debt that are leading to farmer suicides around the world. And also a lot of it is sunk into infrastructure. Like here in Vermont, we have huge manure pits that were built as a best management practice because farmers were directed they had to do that. And now they're sitting empty because now it's no longer considered a best practice, but it costs money to get rid of those or to do something new. So I think that is appropriate, especially when farmers have been directed by the state or by industry to do something that is negative and now it has to be corrected. I think that it's problematic when somebody else is making money off of that transition. And I realize this is how the kind of capital mindset operates, is that I'll give you money if I can get something back from you. But what is being gotten back is not profit, but a benefit to the whole ecosystem. So I think it's a mindset shift of like, what is a return? What is a return? And if the return is financial, it's problematic. If the return is the return of the ecosystems that support all life on Earth, not just the business, not etc., that's different. However, I do think that the state and local governments have a lot of return, or the downstream communities have returns that can come to them directly in those services, right? In those processes that prevent flooding, for example. So in many cases, it may make sense for downstream communities to pitch in funds, and that may include downstream businesses that are affected, to pitch in funds to create a deeper catchment or deeper soils upstream so that the nuclear power cooling pumps are not filling up with silt, that the dam doesn't need to be dredged from all of the soil that is flowing down the river, costing millions, sometimes billions of dollars for dam dredging. So there are costs to be avoided that those who are bearing the costs can pay in advance to never have to pay those costs again. That's very different than making a profit and saying, hey, you do this and I'm going to sell it over here.
Yeah, and I guess that shows that even within any of these dimensions, there's quite a bit of breadth within each one of them. Are we talking about capital for discrete choices in which we're helping people better understand the impact, the financial impact that their choices may have, both in short term or long term, whether it becomes a vehicle at a local level to be able um, to have a dialogue of people at different parts of their watershed and of that sort. And then, as you say, collaboration at a more global level in which we have discussed, and very you've very much alerted us of some of the issues that exist presently and that we need to improve in order to be able to better collaborate at a worldwide motion on this. And it's not just soil carbon. Like you said, water is another commodity that has been something else that has been commoditized, and there's many examples of negative and positive aspects that perhaps can be put out there, perhaps negative, but you know,
And
you all
yeah,
and part of the strength of social security is that it tells us about 23 different roles that perhaps we need to take into account. And again, not only for the global investors or the global type of projects, but also just for the very, very local discrete choice. How if I get a little one more millimeter of water storage in my soil, what does that how does that impact me? And how does it work on that sense?
thank you. And just very briefly, I just wanted to reiterate that part of the concern with commodity capital and commodities is that that the way that trading works is that people can bet on the failure of something. So bet on like the more rare that a endangered species becomes, one could be when you could have a finance group bet on extinction and then actually make it more likely for that to be extinct. If you bet on the failure of water and scarcity of water, then it's in your interest as an investor for there to be less water. So it's a very perverse incentives that develop when things are traded as commodities. Thank you.
And my last question for Avanti, um, you showed us some really incredible things that you guys have been doing over at Safe Soil and the reach that you have been able to have at a global level. Um, do you see this as soil security tool? Because it's something that is also relatively new to the Safe Soil movement. Do you see this as a tool that would help think of soil not just as like this mass and perhaps focus on what's right in front of us, which is usually threats, right? Is like soil, there's a threat to the production of soil here, there's a threat to the salinity here, there's a threat to the structure there. But in thinking in a more holistic manner, uh, do you see the soil structure, the soil security framework being helpful going into the future to better discuss and promote the security of soil so that perhaps we don't have some of the very negative kind of aspects that can develop by not doing it well?
Thanks, Julio. I think it absolutely does, given that um, even the diagram that you'd shown, it identifies soil as the nexus to all of the global solutions. I think presenting what it can resolve, what is its capacity to actually support, whether it's not just human life, right? All life on the planet, all other systems that work together. I think I see it very much in line with what Safe Soil is doing and to present it even more holistically. So I definitely do agree with you. It's important for us to make the storytelling relatable on an individual level. So where does that drive a person to feel connected to it is where the nuance is in my understanding in communication. But yes, definitely agree in principle.
Awesome. Well, I cannot be more thankful to our speakers today and to everyone that's joined us from all over the world. We do have a hands up. So Pravina, yeah, please take it away, Pravina.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks a lot, everyone. That was wonderful to hear. And Didi, that was amazingly provocative. And I wish everybody had so much courage to be that provocative. While I agree with Didi to a great extent that it's such a perversion to bet for something to fail, but which is really, I would say, I don't know, where does that value come from for these individuals? While that exists, but like I've been observing climate finance quite closely, Didi, and in many ways, people are also building systemic efforts, be it in European central banks or some of the Indian banks, where they are taking into consideration, they are actually saying that one of the elements of risk for any of the investments that are done, be it agriculture or any other sector, is because of the fact that ecosystems fail and soil is beginning to feature as one of the climate risks. Therefore, in their interest, we are right now seated in a very strongly capitalist economy from in most of the world, not every country maybe. But given that context, people also don't want their investments to fail, and therefore they're also putting in efforts to ensure and support initiatives to not fail, especially in the front of soil or water, you know. So this is also an observation that I thought I'll table here, given that we are speaking about uh, how, looking at it as a capital is a bit perverse. I agree, it's a little bit reductionist, but it at sometimes we work with what we have and these economic capitalistic ecosystem that we all reside in. How do we somehow turn around for the larger benefit of, like our home, that's our earth, right? How do we do that? So maybe we also look at these efforts um, and maybe try to such efforts, positive efforts actually take further momentum rather than the other ones. So
I
that's my
agree, and I was pushing on one end of this argument. I do understand the other aspects of it, and I know that there are some places that are doing tremendous work. Along those lines, I think the insurance and reinsurance industry is a very interesting intervention point that they will directly benefit from, from promoting soil health, et cetera. And I don't mean to downplay that there are many of these larger institutions that have been very generous and have done things with the right mind. Even if they're still thinking about it as protecting their investments, they are simply giving the money. So I think it gets confusing when protecting the investment becomes an investment. Do you see the difference? So yeah.
All right. And we have one more question from Anna. Hopefully I'm saying it right.
Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. Really, really incredible to see and hear all of your presentations. It's so interesting to see how soils are engaged with in so like many various ways, carbon trading markets, lullabies, motorcycle campaigns. And I think it's in these, I'm a PhD, I'm doing a PhD in international law and soils at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam. And I'm looking at all of the, so many soil practices globally, locally, practices that are entangled with international law, but at the same time, the international law shapes practices underground, and at the same time, local soils shape international law. And that's also what I'm interested in, because soils are they're local, and I'm maybe either of you can maybe respond, or I'm just curious, how do you perceive those local global tensions, soils embedded in cultural ecological meanings, and also the global projects investors, systems of soil governance, certification that maybe tend to universalize or abstract local specificities. Like there's so many things done and soils are engaged with, and they're so upfront. How does this tension play out? If you can, maybe, I hope you follow, but that's just really on top of my mind. It's such a tension. Like soils are here, like we all share the earth beneath our feet, but at the same time it's also globally engaged with. And well, I think that's it. But I was really loving your presentations, and I hope anybody can say something about this. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. And I do have a response, but I do want to hear from any of the other speakers if they have one as well.
I could very quickly say it's indirectly answering your question. I do think that places are very unique, just like each person is unique. And one of the things that we've seen with the big Midwestern farmers who have transitioned to regenerative agriculture is that often they do it with a kind of an investor mind, like I'm losing money, I can't deal with this, I have to try something new. And so they do it for financial reasons, but then they fall in love with the place when they start to see what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it smells like, when the ecosystems start to really do their thing again. So seeing the birds return, hearing their songs in the morning, finding eggs in the pasture, like from wild birds, seeing interesting insects and flowers, etc. Feeling their own health improve as they reduce pesticide use. And so I think that we need to fall in love with place while understanding that each place is also an aspect of a planet that is also utterly unique. I mean, as far as we know, it's the only place that has anything like the life that we have. So the Earth is also a unique place. And it's about really falling in love with place.
That's beautiful.
And that's where we should be sourcing our will, our motivation from for this work. And it's something that we can invite. I mean, the investment community are people too, and they have the capacity to fall in love. So that's my question: is how do we invite them to fall in love, and then say, hey, you have all this resource. What can you do with it from a place of actual love, rather than as a way to make more money?
And
I love that.
This framework has been developed over the last 10 years, and part of it developed because of this. We had the same questions that you did. How do we do this? How can we, like you said, it seems so broad, it seems so big. Every time anybody talked about soils, they brought their own experience and they brought their own thing, and there lacked coordination. I think that that's the main thing that we saw, that there was a lack of coordination, and that every time that somebody had to refer to soils, they had to bring in all this background that in a way made the conversation almost like an individual, and made it very difficult to coordinate what we all want at the end of the day, which is falling in love with this earth in a way that we can communicate with each other. So, to me, and the reason why I ended up coming over here was because it was the idea of learning about this coordination and learning how we can coordinate as humans to better secure soils and be able to secure it and to be able to communicate with one another better. So that to me is your question. I think that the framework is the response that we had to that question when we asked it ourselves. It's like, well, how can we do it? Well, let's try to coordinate better. How do we coordinate better? Let's try to bring in not only the very like physical geochemical aspects of soil, But let's bring in some of these other aspects and let's ask the hard questions, including like the capital question, or let's ask the hard questions about the laws. Do we have the laws for it? Let's ask the hard questions about the connectivity, and like are we losing connectivity because now more people are moving into the city, for example. And it makes me think, for example, of in the Netherlands, you had these soils that back in the day, people literally just chop them, and then take them to the farm. And now you have little deserts in the middle of what used to be forests. So yeah, I think that my answer to you is that that's what this framework has been. The response is the framework itself.
Julio, if I may just add a small point to what you said with the coordination and connectivity aspect, I think even in a similar stead, bringing the actual custodians of the land, which is very often farmers, so getting the local voice at global arenas to ensure that the conflict and understanding between global and local starts minimizing as there is better understanding with a key stakeholder in this.
I love that this the series is called Soul Conversations, and this has definitely turned into one, and it's definitely not a conversation that we wanted to end at the end of this webinar. So on the chat, some people have asked about how we can stay in touch. DD Pursehouse, you can do a DD at landandleadership.org. You can email me. Oh, actually, let me put it right there. So julio.pachon at sydney.edu.au. So that's how you can reach me. Avanti.p at consciousplanet.org. And then we also had Hani put her contact details at the end of her presentation. So in maybe a day or two, we will have this recording up online, and you will be able to find her contact as well. So we can keep this conversation going.
She's put it in the chat as well.
Oh, and she's put it in the chat as well. Not seeing it.
It's Hani.
Oh, there you go. Sorry.
Mohani.
Yeah, hani.mohani at gmail.com. So yeah, keep the conversation going. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day, great rest of the evening, or sleep well if you're on this side of the world. So
thank you so much, Julio, and to the other speakers. It's really great to get to know you. This is a very wonderful surprise to be part of this community and conversation.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.